Hi everyone, Niall Paterson here with the Sky News Daily. Good to have you with us. It is a very sad day, particularly for fans of Liam Payne. The former One Direction singer has died aged just 31. Now, of course, the detail is still emerging at the time of recording, but what we know is that he was pronounced dead at the scene after falling from the third-floor balcony of his hotel in Buenos Aires in Argentina. What we're not doing today, though, is examining what exactly happened at that hotel. You can head elsewhere for that. Instead, we want to focus on Liam Payne's roller coaster into global stardom at such a young age. The success that he and his bandmates enjoyed, but success at a cost. Here with me, Sky's arts and entertainment editor, Claire Gregory. Hi, Claire.
Hi there.
Also with us, Dean Piper, a showbiz journalist turned PR consultant. He was actually at the Mirror at the time One Direction came to fame. He interviewed the X Factor judges and contestants many a time. Good to see you, Dean.
Hi, guys.
OK, look, before we get started, let's have a listen to Liam on stage at the X Factor back in 2010.
Liam, how are you?
How you doing, Simon? You all right?
Nice to see you.
I've seen you in a long time.
It's been a while. 2 years, yeah?
2 years, yeah, 2 years.
You look a little bit like Justin Bieber.
I like that. Thank you very much, thank you.
How far did you get the last time, Liam?
Well, I was here in 2008, and I made it through to Simon's house in Barbados, which was wonderful.
Wow.
Thank you.
And he didn't pick you.
No, he didn't pick me.
Do you think he made a mistake, or did he do the right thing?
No, as always, everybody says in this show, I do think Simon did the right thing because I was really young and I wasn't ready, and now I'm 16, I'm back, and I'm ready to give it another shot.
What age are you now? 16?
16, yeah.
Wow, you just said that, though. You're 16.
Just checking. Just checking.
Liam, good for you, and I'm glad you come back.
I'm glad I've come back too.
And what are you going to sing today?
I'm going to sing Cry Me a River.
Guys, we shouldn't forget, and we should probably start with the fact that they were all so young. Liam was 14 when he first auditioned. He was in the public eye, arguably, from that point on. But he was just 16 when he made the show.
Yeah, it didn't work out first time round, but obviously the second time round, we were ready for him. And I think that, obviously there's a lot of clever people that work on that show, like Mr. Cow. And it was very obvious that as a five-piece, this band were going to be pretty unstoppable. But I don't think they realised how big it was going to get.
I suppose, Claire, the idea that they came third place in a televised a talent show, might have not boded entirely well, but they went on to be arguably one of the world's biggest boy bands ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could argue that and definitely win that argument. But I think it's really important to understand the context of this, because you're saying, they didn't even win this reality show. But in 2010, the reality show outlook was completely different to where we are now. This was kind of at the point where Big Brother was sort of ratings were falling on that. Love Island was years off. It hadn't even kind of started in the iteration that we know and love it now. Even Geordie Shore hadn't got going, but X Factor was the reality show. It drew in massive ratings. I mean, TV shows...
You were watching it. You were watching it before you went out on a Saturday night, you were telling me.
And not just me. I mean, it was a ritual for me. I'm sure there are other people listening that will remember this. You'd watch X Factor with your pals before you went out. I wasn't a young teenager. Don't try and age me here. I was old enough to be going out for a drink and things like that, but it was still such a huge part of our kind of weekend. And if you didn't know what was going on, you were kind of out of the conversation. I remember working in local news, and whoever had been kicked out of X Factor would lead the bulletins the next day. It would be the top story. It was an absolute kind of juggernaut of a show. So, and as you say, of course, they didn't, win on the series. That went to Matt Cardle. But actually, they did win, really. They came out of it with more success than anyone else.
You can compare them, I guess, to a new age Beatles. We hadn't really had anybody band-wise since the Spice Girls that had any sort of global phenomenon fame. Part of that, I think, was timing. I think that everyone had a bit of a hunger for a boy band to come through. My job when I was a journalist every single week was I was down there on set, backstage, interviewing them, hanging out with them, watching them grow on the show, because, from when they actually auditioned through to them getting through to, towards the finals, they changed completely. They were completely different characters. They were kind of being built in this washing machine of being on a television show to prepare themselves for global stardom.
I mean, you've got to give it to those who put them together. If they didn't see what they had in the first place, by the end of the series, they were properly One Direction, the One Direction that I now think of. Yeah.
Exactly. And you know that because Simon Cowell signed them to his record label immediately, even though he didn't have to do that because he only had to, the deal with the X Factor was the winner kind of was guaranteed a kind of record deal. So, he instantly saw how popular they were going to be. One of the things that's really important to recognise with One Direction is they were all really talented. These weren't a group of kind of people that couldn't sing, that they kind of forced into a boy band. These were all really great singers independently. And I think what really happened that series is the group's kind of group on the X Factor was a little bit weak, and they had too many soloists, and that's why they made them into a band to try and kind of boost the quality of the group section on X Factor, and they were brilliant singers. Liam was often thought of as the lead singer. He had this incredible vocal range, and he was also he said himself in an interview later on that he was sort of the sensible one, that he was expected to kind of be a bit of a grown up sometimes when things were getting out of control, which is absolutely wild to think that he was only 16 during this series, and yet somehow he was kind of tasked with having this level of maturity that maybe the others didn't have.
But Dean, but even with this kind of nascent pop phenomenon there, it was by no means certain that they would go on to have the global success that they did. Their first 4 albums debuted at #1 in the United States. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah. It was huge. It was unprecedented. And I think when you look at the machine that was behind, you realise that they were taking it very seriously. They wanted to ensure that this was a longevity thing. It wasn't just a flash in the pan. They were definitely seen as cash cows. They wanted to be able to send them into arenas all across the States because it was ka-ching right from the get-go. And I think the other thing to think about as well was, obviously we hadn't really seen anything on this scale since Take That, I guess, when Robbie left and Robbie became the solo star. And I think that's another thing to consider with Liam, because it's all very well being told that you're going to be the person to be the breakout star, but the reality was it wasn't him, it was Harry. And I think for him, that was a big thing for him to deal with.
And I want to touch on the fandom as well, because I think one of the reasons that One Direction were the huge success that they were is because of the time they hit this kind of fame rocket at the same time as kind of social media fandoms were also rocketing. And whether it was engineered or not, they kind of created these groups of ultra fans online who really helped. And these fans could communicate with each other in a way that they couldn't perhaps during certainly those first versions of Take That. You could be chatting with someone in Australia about how much you loved Louis Tomlinson, and all of this ecosystem of fandom grew up around them and helped propel them to this massive star status.
I mean, Dean, just thinking back to your time covering the show, I mean, what I remember of the X Factor is, it was one of those kind of things we used to call appointment to view television. It was so much more than just watch the show, vote for your act, wait for the next week. Everyone was so much more engaged with it. And for that to have taken place, Simon Cowell and the producers of this programme, well, they were feeding the beast, weren't they?
X Factor became pretty much, apart from the Royals or maybe the odd scandal as far as an affair, it was the most bankable target as far as us being able to garner sales. So we knew that if we put... I'd get each of the judges on each series. So if it was Cheryl, we knew that immediately we'd have loads of sales. If there was a private life situation with one of the guests, if there was a security scare at the studio, plus we were being pumped with so much information from all sides, each of the judges having their own PR, the PRs for the show, the people that are behind there, the snitches that are giving you, your sourced quotes for stories. There was so much to absorb from working at a tabloid newspaper from a show like X Factor. It was kind of, in one way, obviously it was the gift that kept on giving because we always had something to write about. But I think that upon reflection, you come out of journalism with shall we say, a slight bit of PTSD where you realise that you were part of the problem. I think that there's a big issue with journalists and editors especially who would, they'd write the headlines before you'd even left to do the interview with Simon Cowell, or Louis Walsh calling you after to make sure he got his opinion of what was going on. It was really like being in a wind turbine and just trying to get through the other side. It was a lot.
But talk to me just literally about practically how all that happened. I mean, you've written recently, in fact, about the X Factor, and you used these words. Behind the scenes, it was little more than a viper's nest.
Yeah, I mean, look, you only have to look at a show like X Factor to just realise, and also a channel like ITV in a way, I'm not going to fully bash them, but I think that, we didn't have duty of care back then. We didn't make sure that everyone was fine. Sure, they had someone that was with them, assigned to look after them for the show, but the reality is, how on earth can you prepare someone to go from being a 14, 16-year-old, propelled into a pop band, to suddenly within 4 years or even less than that, becoming a global phenomenon? You can't prepare someone mentally for that. And I think that upon reflection, I'm sure that there's a lot of people that look back on those times and think, God, we didn't really look after them at all. These kids were just thrown into the mess that was fame and celebrity and adoration, and they really had to hope that they could make their way through it. And, you only have to look at some members of the band. They've not all got through it very well. Zayn's had his issues. Louis mentioned it in interviews. Liam was one of them as well. We don't know about people like Harry. He's not really done that much stuff, so we don't know how he's managed to get himself through it.
It's made even more difficult, isn't it, when, as always happens, the band comes to an end and everyone starts thinking about what follows next. And particularly for Liam, it wasn't easy, was it?
No, I don't think it was. I think it's hard, isn't it? Because, as you say, huge, unimaginable global success in a band. And then, you go away, take some time. What kind of artist do I want to be? And then you come back. And actually, Liam did have success as a solo artist.
And songwriter as well.
And songwriter. I was going to say, he's a prolific songwriter. I think actually people kind of maybe aren't quite aware that or even in One Direction, he was among, the two kind of credited on writing some of those songs. He's written for other people and he collaborated with lots of people in the industry, which does show a level of respect for his work. So I think it's easy to kind of write him off, he didn't really have much of a solo career. I don't think that's true. I think he struggled to find a kind of niche in a way that perhaps Harry Styles or Niall, they didn't. They kind of found a genre that really worked for them and they could really lean into. And I think for Liam, he's sort of talked quite openly about his struggles after the band. Certainly he's talked about struggles with alcohol, with his mental health. And I think, that kind of lack of duty of care, that lack of aftercare that Dean mentioned, it's hard to know what a different system might have, how that might have impacted what went on afterwards.
I mean, you look at those, Dean, who were in the series back in 2010, and it's not just One Direction who have spoken about this lack of support. Others, I mean, Katie Wassell, who was there in 2010, has tweeted today. I'm just going to read a little quote from it. We need only look at Simon Cowell's recent interview with Stephen Bartlett, the businessman who runs a podcast, where Simon Cowell admits his greatest regret was not owning the band's name. The real regret should be the failure to prioritise the emotional and physical welfare of the artists who put their trust in these institutions. I mean, looking at it through the prism of 2024, it is almost impossible to believe that just a decade, less than a decade and a half ago, actual kids, were being put into this position.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, I think that there's a huge duty of care conversation across the whole ball game of celebrity, because I just feel like it's getting to the point with, even Peaches Geldof, Caroline Flack, now Liam, we're seeing these celebrities in plain sight day to day. We're seeing that they're struggling. We've seen Amy Winehouse. We've seen all of these people that we've lost. But who's looking after them? Who's by their side? What management team are not concentrating on what happens after that person goes away to just keep them in a good place mentally? And
I agree. The industry needs to kind of have a look at itself. And I think that, there are more conversations now. I was just looking at the 2023 kind of duty of care guidelines for Love Island, which I think is the closest thing we have to a big reality show. And actually, things that they're offered now, the contestants include financial training on inclusive language, so that, they're less likely to say something which causes them to kind of get into hot water. they pause their social media activity while the show is on, and then they're given training on the impacts of social media and handling potential negativity, and then they have what they describe as a proactive aftercare package, which I just can't see any of that was happening back in 2010.
It really wasn't, Claire. It's great that they've got things in place, but I think there needs to be so much more done to look after these young people.
Claire, I think we would be doing Liam Payne a disservice if we did not mention the ways in which the difficulties that he experienced and the pressure that he felt manifested themselves, because he himself talked about it. He talked about the depression, he talked about alcohol and drug abuse, and of course recently there has been the story involving his ex-fiancée and her allegations about the way in which he has been attempting to communicate with her.
Over the years, really, since One Direction, he's talked about struggles with alcohol. Most recently, just last year, 2023, he'd been in rehab and had a clean period. He's gone on shows. He did a show on Sky Arts. We talked about kind of things piling up and the stresses and strains and having these very negative thoughts. But seemingly, there was an impact to the people around him. His former fiancée, she has had lawyers issue a cease and desist letter against him for inappropriate contact, she says. She talked about harassment as well.
But Claire, I wonder if a set of circumstances like this could happen again, that a group of young boys, girls, whatever, get catapulted into the global spotlight, incredible financial success, but without the necessary support networks that we would now just straight off the bat, expect to be in place before the series even started.
I mean, it sounds like a modern fairy tale, doesn't it? You queue up for an audition to be on national telly, and within, a couple of years, you're an international superstar. So many young people dream of fame. But I would argue that although it does sound like something of a fairy tale, it's already a bit dated. I don't think we just don't have the mechanic for that anymore. TV has changed. Reality TV has changed. And hopefully, with all the duty of care that is now in place, contestants on such shows are better looked after. But I mean, is there still a culture of people trolling those that are famous? Is fame a double-sided thing? Yes, certainly, for sure.
I mean, I definitely think that the bubble's burst as far as the manufactured side of pop. I feel like we've kind of moved on, but that's not to say that a trend won't come around in another 10 years and suddenly it'll all be back. Simon Cowell with a new face trying to do X Factor mark, 2030 or whatever. I kind of feel like the future's definitely open, and I think that if people can make money out of pop stars and kids that are just emerging, then I think they will try to do it. I mean, the good news is that at the moment in the music industry, the people that are actually succeeding appear to be people that have got the grassroots network in place. They're the people that are writing their music. They're the people that are very in control of their career. They seem to be with a lot better management as far as they're navigating their way through with good people by their side. And those are the people that are having success. So you can only but hope.
Dean, Claire, thanks both very much indeed. Care owed to participants in British television shows have certainly developed in recent years. We, of course, reached out to ITV for comment. At the time of publication, we had not yet received a reply. That's your lot for this edition of The Daily. We'll see you again soon.